All right. So, a little introduction first. There we go. So, for those of you that don't know, this is Cole. He was the treasurer last year in our club. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how your activity was before then, but
I was VP for 1 year. Some people might remember.
yeah, he graduated last year, and now he is working in the AAA industry at Microsoft in what country or what state again?
I'm living in Seattle right now, Washington.
Okay, yeah. But without further ado, I'll let you take it away, Cole.
All right, thanks for giving me the floor. Like you said, I'm Cole Martin, recent grad with a comp sci degree, graduated last May, and as you said, I'm currently living out of Seattle, Washington, just east of there, in fact, working out of the Microsoft headquarters in Bellevue. I've been working there since the beginning of December, so about 5 months now, as a part of their compatibility testing, um, colloquially known as Shield Labs. Shield Labs is a company that actually makes shields. Shield Lab is the Microsoft team that I'm a part of. Um, I'm essentially a QA tester, a QA engineer, uh, and I thought it would be good to share with you all my experiences, how I got here, my thoughts on the industry as a whole, from the insight that I've had, and whether I think it's a good career path for you guys to take as aspiring devs or people who want to pursue QA for its own sake. So a little bit about me. Recent ISU grad, as I've stated before. Big gamer. I've always loved games as a kid. It was a great way for me to connect to my siblings and my parents growing up, and the kind of those kind of experiences inspired me going into high school, the last half of high school and into college to pursue game development more seriously. I joined that club in 2016 under the leadership of Zachary Cohn and became VP the year after. And then during my super senior year, I rejoined the club as the treasurer. I've always had a great love for you guys in the game dev club. Really helped me get my foot in the door as far as discovering what game dev really means and learning the ropes of what I actually want to do in the game dev industry. Um, so to tell you how I acquired this position, um, I suppose the first thing to start with was when I decided to pursue that opportunity. So a couple months after I graduated, I was hired not by a game dev company, but I was hired as a full stack developer for Cambric Yard, based out of the Dallas Fort Worth area. I worked remotely, and I made good money there. But I only stayed there for about a month because, as I learned, salaried work is ripe with abuses. So um, after that, I was kind of disillusioned with working professionally and decided between if I was to choose between making a lot of money or doing pursuing the career path I would ultimately enjoy, I would rather choose the latter. I experienced a job that paid me really well, and I decided that experience wasn't sustainable for me. So shortly after leaving that company, I decided to look for new work. I did the same thing you guys probably do. I look up on Google. I used a lot of LinkedIn. LinkedIn was ultimately where I got in touch with my contact. I technically work third party for Microsoft. I'm an external employee. I'm working under Experis, which is a subsidiary of Manpower Group. They are probably one of the biggest QA bodies in the states, I would say, or at least they're getting there. Um, I found them advertising on LinkedIn. I did some research and I saw that it didn't seem they treated their employees terribly, so I gave it a shot. I was originally planning on moving to their new office in Milwaukee, which will be opening soon if anyone's interested. It's a lot better than the drive to Seattle, I'll tell you that much. And while I was originally going to be hired for that position, some miscommunication with Microsoft and Experis led them to delaying the opening of that office, and I was left with a choice: either pack up and move about 25 hours to the Seattle area from Iowa, or wait it out and see what happens. And wanting to capitalize on the opportunity I saw ahead, and seeing the opportunity to get my foot in the door in the industry and have any sort of insight to what it's really like working there, I decided, screw it, I'll move to Seattle, big city. Never done it before, but we'll see what happens. So come the week after Thanksgiving, I installed a hitch on my little CRV, and I drove and drove and drove. I drove through Nebraska. That was the worst of it. Please never drive through Nebraska if you can help it. I've done it 3 times now, and I've regretted it every single time. Um, but needless to say, I arrived safely in Seattle, and I began my work with the Shield Lab. I found the environment so far to be very pleasant, and to give you an idea of the hiring process, when I first reached out to Experius, I set up 2 rounds of interviews. One with my recruiter, um, who was very friendly. Just a pretty standard recruiter. Wanted me to get work because it helped her make money, but also seemed genuinely interested in getting me to where I wanted to be. She got me in contact after the Milwaukee position fell through with the Shield Labs team in Seattle, which is their main team. And I took a second round of interviews with their 2 managers, or the 2 Shield leads, I should say. They walked me through a fairly basic understanding of QA, mostly asking what would I do in this sort of situation, or the tools I might try to use. And it was, I wouldn't say it was very difficult. It took me a little bit of prep work ahead of time to get more of the technical terms out of the way, different types of testing, and how it relates to my experience working with this club, and as a casual developer, to know what kind of testing I've been doing and practicing up until then. Um, but after that second round of interviews, they offered me the position fairly quickly. Um, and from that, I moved to Seattle. Come December, I started working on the team. And while it was a tough decision to make, especially as Seattle is one of the most expensive cities, I would say so far it's been shaping up pretty nicely. Um, my job duties as a QA engineer are the following. The Shield Lab has essentially 3 different, I wouldn't say departments, but we cover three parts of QA testing at our team. We do compatibility testing, which is basically running a game on about over 100 different machines and tablets and laptops of differing specs to see where the breakpoint is as far as how the game is running and what the hardware compatibility will be. If it's aligning to what our contacts are expecting, or not, or specifically, sometimes they're looking for specific bugs in areas. If we're testing high-end devices, basically we're seeing more the hardware usage. What's the RAM usage looking like in these areas? Does it jump up in any particular spot? We're playing through small snippets of the game multiple times over on a varying amount of devices with varying power and hardware specs, and capturing the performance output and basically compiling that all to say, hey, your devices work well on this as you expected. It's not working on these devices that it should, or it doesn't work on this specific type of GPU that people are using popularly, or these types of monitors, stuff like that. I would say that's the biggest part of what I do there with the Shield team. Secondarily, we have a multiplayer department. We have one section that's entirely dedicated at all times to play Halo Infinite. Um, they've been doing this for months and months before I got there, before the game was released, and they're still testing it now. And I have had a bit more limited experience with their MP testing, but it's pretty. How do I describe it? It's pretty tedious over there. We're not really testing for game balance or game feel necessarily. They're not usually going to us to ask our opinions on that. They're looking again for stability, especially with certain disconnects and network speeds and stuff like that. Again, our purpose, by and large, is to ensure their games work on as many devices as possible. They want to get a bigger market share and be able to sell it to as many people as possible. We give them feedback to help make that possible. And on the MP side, that's usually networks and bandwidth, with some focus on exploits. Can people do lag switching or WAN disconnects to trick the server into letting them basically freeze time, stuff like that. Um, as well as making sure that titles meet the requirements for Xbox to be used on their Xbox services. They have a list of about 200 requirements to make sure games are working properly. I wouldn't say they always get checked very thoroughly, but it's our job to go over that and make sure they are. Things like using the Xbox game invite or the friends lists or certain behaviors with making sure the games are using the features that Xbox provides and are wanting them developers to use when they publish games on Xbox or Microsoft PCs, essentially. And thirdly, we have a smaller department dedicated to basically accessibility testing. Um, Things like Caesar sensitivity, accessibility for subtitles, closed captioning, color blindness. It's not as common, or at least we don't dedicate many people to that. But it's probably my favorite part of the Shield Labs team because making games accessible is something I personally am very interested in, having a lot of disabled friends myself. Um, and that kind of sums up the department as a whole. My week to week looks like about Monday, we'll go into the office. I always work in the office. We used to have a work from home, but that has since stopped. So we'll have a meeting on Monday morning where they'll tell us the path we're working on, whether that be something like Forza Horizon, Halo Infinite, Ghostwire Tokyo, a recent release. We did a pass on that about a month ago. They'll tell us the game work on, and they'll tell us, okay, so they want us to test this. We'll be going to these areas that they predetermined they want us to look at. We'll play the game for anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours, depending on what they're looking for, and all the while gathering performance data through various tools to tell us how the GPU, CPU, RAM, frame rate, how all of them are handling in real time, and then compiling that data, sending it to a database, and then finding a new device to work on. And that usually takes anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. My department, while normal QA, you'll be sticking with a development team for months or years at a time. The Shield Labs specifically will cycle through games every 1 to 2 weeks. And revisit them a few months down the line. It's a bit different than what you'll normally find in QA, but the day-to-day job roles are very similar to what you'll find. As far as things outside the job, QA as a viable career path, I have some certain thoughts on that. Seattle is a very expensive place to live. I'm currently living in a month-to-month Airbnb. Uh, Renting the place out with about 5 other people. And it's doable for me, but it's not great. I wouldn't say I could do this specific position long term with the pay I'm getting. But I would say the work at least is very enjoyable. And for those of you who would find QA interesting for its own sake, I know people who work in the industry for a few months, and I know people like my manager who've been there for 15 years. It takes all types to do it. Additionally, specifically because you are all in college and are assumedly going to get degrees before you start looking at positions like QA, I will give a heads up that QA has a very, very low bar of entry, which is partially responsible for the problems with getting paid appropriately. None of my coworkers, I would say, perform any worse than I do. Um, a lot of them just come into the job, sometimes lacking even a GED, and they get hired and get paid fairly well. But for those of you with degrees and college debt to pay off and such, just be forewarned, it might take a little while to make a wage that you're happy with. And that's kind of the situation I'm stuck with. I am surviving, and it is something I'm going to continue doing for a while. I just thought to be honest and upfront to you that there are certain risks to pursuing the industry, or at least like I have moving across half the country to a very expensive city. Um, I think I would like to open the floor out to gather my thoughts a bit more for questions. I do have to give you guys time to think. I already have some prepared from the general chat that I'd like to go over. Um, Specifically, it seems I was asked how can about the work environment specifically, and how I get along with my coworkers. I love the environment I work in. I have not enjoyed my coworkers more in any other job than where I work now. There's a great sense of camaraderie, mostly because we're all very broke and trying to make ends meet. But we're all loving what we're doing here, and that shows through with how we treat each other and how we approach our work. Um, it is pretty conductive to new ideas. I don't feel afraid to talk to my managers, Matt or Ryan, at any point. I chat with them regularly if I have questions or I have critique on something I would like to do differently or like to pursue differently with how I'm approaching our work. And pretty regularly, I'd say quarterly, I have a chance to meet with the big heads, the big like assistant managers and stuff who head the department, and talk to them about my satisfaction with the work, things I would like to change, things I would like to do differently, and if I have any plans to move forward or up in the company. Um, they're just absolutely supportive. I don't feel uh, at all pressured into being quiet about the working conditions or anything like that. And the working conditions, as they stand, pay aside, are quite good. The Microsoft campus is a wonderful place to be. It feels like a college campus just without the classrooms. They're just offices instead. I get pretty good benefits from the job, and the on work benefits are pretty nice too. I feel well taken care of, pay aside. Um, Now, as far as balancing goes, I was asked, have I worked on any balancing stuff? Which I know a lot of people are interested in. And when I was thinking about QA, that's where I go to as well, getting the numbers down properly and game feel kind of stuff. And while you will find that in some types of QA, especially if you're more intimately related with the actual dev team, we're a bit disconnected because we're third party. People will we're basically the outsourced QA. They'll usually have an in team, an in-house in studio QA team, and then they'll outsource to us for stuff like compatibility and multiplayer testing, just because that requires a lot of devices and resources that studios don't always have. So I don't personally, or I don't think anyone in the Shield Lab really handles balancing stuff. That's just simply not a field that Shield Lab is concerned with, I would say. I was also asked how the coffee is. I haven't had the coffee. But we do have fridges, like two of them on each of the four stories of the building, and I do like that. It is nice having free drinks on hand at all times. I'm sure the coffee's fine. I just have never had a reason to reach for it yet. Um, do I ever do game development related things outside of work? I do. I do. It's professional work that I volunteer for, so it feels a bit weird. But since my senior year, I take my free time on the weekends, and after work is done to do gameplay programming for Fenco Studios on a title of just, I won't name because it has some adult material. Um, I know this is being recorded, but I work on gameplay programming for a different studio that I met some years ago. That's my kind of my side work. I don't make any money off of it, but it keeps my skills sharp. Since I'm not really engaged in programming since I've graduated, it helps me from becoming rusty and still contributing to the industry as a whole. I'll open up to the floor. Anyone in chat or in the room, if you have any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can. You're a little quiet, but I can hear you. I should be able to understand what you're saying.
Okay. I want to ask if you are allowed to tell us what is the most positive experience that you've had at your workplace?
The most positive experience I've had in QA
Yeah.
so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I'm going to have one coming up. We're about to have a social night. One of the first ones that they've had in 2 years, and the first one I've been able to participate in. I'm sure that's going to be a positive experience. So I would, if this were a week later, I'd probably say that. But the ones I've experienced to this date, I would say this was, I think, my second week working there. My first or second week starting at the Shield Lab team. We were gathered up in a meeting room because we were given gifts by the Halo development team, which was very nice. Basically thanking us for our work. Even though I wasn't I wasn't hired at that point. I hadn't touched Halo Infinite. But I got the swag nonetheless. They gave us a Funko Pop and some other stuff, a nice poster and a very cool like steel mug. And that's always nice. It feels very. I feel closer with the development team when stuff like that happens. I know we're appreciated in the industry, or at least I hope the people we work for appreciate the work we do. But it's gestures like that which I wasn't expecting, which makes me feel a lot better about my decision to come up here, despite the struggles financially. So I would say that was probably my most positive experience so far. It just feels nice to have the dev team reach out and be like, hey, we really like what you guys did. We went out of our way. Here's some merchandise. Here's a steel mug ingrained with the development team to show that you guys were a part of it too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else about about the industry itself, how it relates to the game development industry? I have some insights on that. If I can get my thoughts focused with some leading questions, more about my day-to-day work. Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you want to be, like in the industry?
So while I wouldn't say I don't hate QA work. I actually, this is one of my first jobs I've had where coming into work doesn't feel dreadful. I get to play games. It's work. I don't get to sit there and zone out with like Halo Infinite to say I'm working. I'm gathering performance. I have to be alert and attentive at all times to catch things like frame hitching or like graphical corruptions. Any number of test cases we go over. But the work itself is fun. I mean, I'm still playing games in a sense. However, to the end that I want to be in, I ultimately want to be a gameplay programmer. That's always been my passion. I got this computer science degree to go do that. And I'm honestly pretty overqualified for the position I have now. I could certainly also be happy with a leadership position at the Shield Labs team. I have some, after questions, I have some insights I got from my boss, Matt Igaz, who is also a computer science major from DigiPen, which you guys might know, pretty well-renowned game development, game design academy. And he seems very happy with the work. I'm sure QA could be a thing I find enjoyable too. I think it's very important work to do. But if I were to have free reign to choose the industry, the part of the industry I get help with, I would absolutely pick gameplay programming. I want to create experiences more than I necessarily feel the need to make sure other people's experience are polished to the best of my ability. Yeah. Anyone else? I'm a pretty open book. Yeah, in the back.
So I was just wondering. So you mentioned that your studio or group that you work for is Microsoft, and I know they're working on Halo Infinite, and that's a very Microsoft related game. So I was wondering if your the company you're working with is um, more involved with groups outside of Microsoft as well? Like, do you take any indie projects? Do you take any other AAA?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll run through a list of things I've worked on. Most of them are pretty heavily tied with Microsoft, but I wouldn't say necessarily that they're Microsoft studios. They generally are, or at least Microsoft has a stock in them. I'm unsure, honestly. This would be a question I would have to ask about if we accept people if they pay us enough to do QA for devices that titles that are wholly unrelated to Microsoft Studios or the companies they own. We've done stuff like with Ghostwire Tokyo. I'll get the name right one day, which was published by ZeniMax, Bethesda ZeniMax, which was recently acquired. Obviously, there's first-party titles like Halo. There's been a smaller studio that's also, I believe, under ZeniMax as well. A title called As Dusk Falls. Forza Horizon. I would say most of them you could pretty easily see the Microsoft influence, but I don't doubt that we don't work with. I don't doubt that we work with third-party titles as long as they want to be on Xbox. Our Shield Lab team has a use to them because we have requirements to say for games that want to be published on the Xbox. Those 200 Xbox requirements. The best way to make sure those get approved of are to go to us, basically, because we test them all the time. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about QA or the industry as a whole? Microsoft even?
Yes.
I hear. Go ahead.
How much stake do employers put in a minor? Especially if you're like in software or computer science.
So for QA specifically, like I said, I work with people who lack even GEDs, like they didn't graduate high school, and they work alongside me and get paid comparably, within $1 or $2, I would say. So I wouldn't say they look for experience more than anything else. My computer science degree helped me, without much actual experience, understand a lot of the basics for testing. And what goes into it and things to look out for, especially as someone who does gameplay programming on the side, and I had to test my own stuff. So for minors, I wouldn't say it's weighed any more or less than a major, but that is to say that I don't think they are looked at that heavily in general, just because the basic requirement for the job, at least where I work, is you don't even have to have a GED. But it doesn't hurt. It got me to where I am with a slightly better pay. And if I had been in the Milwaukee position, which I still might do at some point once the office opens, I would have started at a higher level than I am now. I think I would have been QA4, which is I think right under the lead, in a sort of like middleman managerial position. So it helps, but it's not like a deal breaker for getting the job or not. If you've graduated college, you are almost overqualified to at least start baseline in the industry for QA.
Thank you.
Anyone else about Microsoft? Yes, again in the back.
I was just wondering if working on projects that had NDAs has affected your game development experience outside of working with the company itself.
I didn't quite get that. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, so I was wondering if I'm trying to think of how to word it. How have NDAs affected your work on projects outside of your main job, right? So you mentioned that you're working on like a side project or like a side.
Yeah.
Is that
As far as NDAs go, they don't affect me very much. I mean, on paper, I'm not allowed to talk about the projects I'm working on. But I mean, I've only mentioned stuff that's been released so far. At least I think so. I don't think they'll find this YouTube video. But like they don't want us in the QA obviously talking about titles that are very early in development, which I've touched a few of, and I've neglected to mention. It's generally not that that strict though. I feel pretty comfortable talking about it with my coworkers or mentioning titles, at least by code name, to my significant other. It doesn't really affect my work or even my work on the side with Fenco Studios. There's no real clash between the two and between my work and my personal life because of NDAs or any other conflicting interests, I would say. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Just as a show of hands, who here has considered using QA as like a either a stepping stone to get where they want to in the industry, or just for its own sake? Has anyone here considered, like, seriously considered going to that industry? No, that was the same way until I saw the offer, honestly. Well, just in case, I do have a couple of pointers for those who are looking for jobs. Seattle is very competitive. We have a lot of headquarters here. There's Amazon. Amazon doesn't have their headquarters, but they have a big place up here. Nintendo headquarters are up here, as well as Microsoft headquarters. So there's a lot of competition. I'm working against a lot of different interests for this work, which doesn't always wash out with the best conditions for me. At least, again, as I said, monetarily. If you were to seriously consider going QA, I would recommend smaller population centers, stuff like Milwaukee, or there's one in Arizona. I can't remember. The place like Arizona, Milwaukee, they always budding Silicon Valley areas that are popping up all around the country. If you have the option to go there, with your skills being, hopeful grads, you have a much better chance of having forward momentum to get higher, to get promoted faster, as well as start in a higher position, and have more favorable benefits and wages in those areas, just because there's simply less demand, and by comparison, that makes a lot of you look a lot better. Yeah. A brief instance. I just don't want to make sure I'm skipping over anyone with questions. I asked my manager, as I said, Matt Igaz, for some of his wisdom. As I said, he has a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science in specifically real-time interactive simulation from the DigiPen Institute of Technology. He is currently the assistant manager of a hardware compatibility testing lab that works with Microsoft. And he's been in the QA industry, for about 15 years, with over 5 of that specifically in leadership. Wonderful guy. I love talking to him. He's helped me out a lot with work and stuff outside of work as well. Very friendly guy to talk to. I asked him for some insights, why he does this job, what the testing is like outside of Microsoft, the Shield Lab, because I know the way we work is very different. You're not going to find a lot of QA positions where we're cycling in and out of studios. You'll usually find one associated with the studio. You'll work on one title from beginning to end, and when that title is done, you'll find a new job, or hopefully that team you're working for is already working on a new title for you to start testing with. The way we work is, I would say, probably more secure, has more job security. But we don't have quite that connection with the dev team as you might find elsewhere. And our work differs a bit too. You might have a bit more of that balancing testing and see games in earlier states than you might otherwise at our Shield Labs team. I asked him why he decided to work in the game test specifically, because this dude knows his stuff. He's been like a lead at Nintendo. He's worked on titles like Super Smash Bros. Brawl on the Wii. He did a lot of Wii testing back in the day, and for my position, it seems like he could have any job he wanted, but he's in QA, especially with his degree. And so I wondered why he stuck with that. And he just, as he said, he loves playing games. He loves working on games. And more importantly, for QA specifically, he loved making sure games ship in the best possible state for everyone to enjoy, which I can sympathize with, especially with accessibility. I want games to release in their best state, which is very frustrating sometimes with titles like Halo Infinite. As anyone who has played it, it's been about 6 months, and the fact that we're still testing it probably signals that we need a bit more work on it. So it's frustrating, but it's a rewarding experience to know that without my help, these games wouldn't be working as well for as many people. So I'm sure I've helped somewhere people enjoy the games that I get to enjoy. Sure. I'll go back to questions really quick. Any advice for interviews? So, as I said, the most important thing, at least as far as being calm and confident about QA, as I said, you're going to be pretty overqualified for these positions if you have a bachelor's degree under your belt. And so take that confidence in stride. The thing I did to prepare was I looked at work I had already done for testing, because obviously I didn't have experience in the industry directly. I had this gameplay programming stuff on the side that was professional work, but it wasn't QA specific because we don't have a QA team with that studio. And I had a bunch of college work I did, which did have some testing. I'm sure you guys have learned JUnits and stuff like that. I basically looked at that and I related it to current testing procedures. I said, okay, when I test the way I've been testing games, what is that kind of testing? Stuff like gray, white, and black box testing. Different terminology like that really helped me out a lot. But the thing I learned only after my interview that I wish I knew before is that sometimes when they're asking you to create the process by which you would go about testing a bug, the solutions can be very simple. So much so that I didn't feel comfortable giving those answers because I thought it made me look very dumb and plain. Like, hey, this game is running very poorly. Like, what do you do? And I gave like more technical answers, trying to figure out what's wrong and diagnose the problem. But I didn't mention like opening up the task manager because I thought that was so obvious. I didn't be like, oh, you like do control like Windows XT and then you go to the task manager to see like hardware usage. I didn't want to do that. It seemed too obvious for me. But they told me after the fact that absolutely no, you want to like, even if it seems really simple, you should say it because it helps them know that you know the obvious stuff and that you're aware of things like that. So it wasn't a very technical interview. It was mostly like giving me theoretical situations and how I would handle them. So some about a day or two of prep work and relating your own experiences with testing to find any overlap you can, and stating the obvious, even if you think it's too obvious, is what would really help you get in this industry. Yeah, I hope that helps. Going back to some nuggets of wisdom again from Matt. I asked him, is testing a good entry point for development and design? Which is I think all of you, honestly, is what you might consider QA to be, not for its own sake, but as a way to get in touch with people in the industry. Shield Lab specifically is a bit hard with that, like I said, because we're not directly connected with anyone's studio. I don't know anyone on the dev teams for these games I test, which kind of sucks, but it does help in some ways. For him specifically, having 15 years of experience, he's worked with these companies directly for QA. And he told me that while testing is a great place to get your foot into the industry, especially with a studio, if you're working under them directly, it's not necessarily a guaranteed path towards your dream job, which is something I've come to realize. I still have, just having this job isn't going to get me to where I need to go. I need to still be working in my free time to build a portfolio. He said for both designers and developers, start out in test to get a taste of what the industry is like, but continue working on side projects outside to build your portfolio. QA work is great at showing a passion and interest in games, which will help your resume stand out from others, but it shouldn't be the cornerstone of it. You won't get a job in the industry because you worked in QA. You'll get a job in the industry because you worked in QA and then kept building it'll help you get connections, people to know, and help you have insights into how things work around there. It's not going to be, oh, you worked in QA, well, you're qualified for this position, because they're usually not the same. I asked him what testing is like, especially outside of Shield Lab specifically. And he admitted, like I said, that our testing is a little different compared to more standard debug or functional testing. He wrote testing tests. For those types of tests, you will typically be working on the same title from anywhere for a few months to years, and most likely you will not even be touching the whole title. You'll be in very specific subsections. It was just true in Shield Labs. I touch about maybe an hour. I'm lucky if I touch an hour or two of actual gameplay in the game. I'm usually repeating about like 2 or 3 15-minute sections at a time, and I don't get to see what the entire game has to offer. Because usually taking a sample size of how the game plays in certain areas is good enough to know how it's going to perform broadly, and saves a lot of time. Some teams will focus only on multiplayer aspects. Others will do purely solo content. And sometimes it can be very granular, like UI and interfaces. I had one day where I did nothing but time the loading times of Minecraft on mobile devices. It was terrible, but I did it. I had like 20 different phones, and I would hit there and I hit a button and then start a timer. And then when it loaded, I would go in another menu and time that over and over. And that was my entire like 8-hour shift. You'll do stuff as granular as that. Just whatever these people want to optimize their game for, you'll test it. Hardware testing can be a bit more variety on the software side, but repetitive on the devices and tasks. Like I said, I'm repeating the same tests over and over for anywhere from 10 to like 30 devices. 30 is a bit much. Maybe on a 2-week pass, 30 devices, but usually 10 to 20 devices a week. They'll, as he said, take 100 games, play for 6 minutes through these sections, and record performance. That's what a lot of what you'll see in QA performance. You won't necessarily be doing stuff like balancing and game feel unless you're really intimate with the dev team. I don't know if it's a thing where they just aren't open to feedback, or they handle it themselves. I wish sometimes I could give feedback on stuff, because stuff like Ghostwire Tokyo would have been nice to give some feedback on, because it's a great game, but like it could have, one of us could have told them to do some stuff differently to make it more fun. I think it got like a 7 out of 10 on release. And finally, the most important part, and something I'm still learning, is what does it take to survive in testing and QA? And he told me, as in reply, it takes patience, passion, and professionalism. You're going to have to play the same game 40 hours a week for months on end over the same area, writing bug reports day in and day out. If it doesn't sound like fun, and you're correct. I do enjoy my job, but it's not always fun. Like sometimes the game is fun and I'm stuck with it for a week, and that's pretty good. Sometimes I'm stuck playing Minesweeper for a week, which is not very fun, but I have to, like, it varies. I just kind of put up with it because it's work, and I like what I'm doing so far. People that survive in test find their own ways to enjoy the work and use their love for the industry to keep us going. Very true. For me personally, I look at I work at my work as a reflection of my own value as someone for my contributions to the industry. I do a good job because this is not where I want to be, and if I can't do a good job here, that shows a lack of commitment to do a good job when I actually want to be where I want to be. So even if I really don't like the game, if it's just a really poor performing game, if I'm testing Halo Infinite and when I accept an invite, it launches Sea of Thieves for some reason instead. Real bug, by the way. Don't know why. Yeah, if you accept an invite for Halo, outside of the game isn't launched and you accept the invite, instead of launching the game, sometimes it'll open Minecraft or Sea of Thieves. I don't know. It's frustrating sometimes. But I channel that frustration sometimes that I feel into I am better than whatever this game is throwing at me, and if I'm going to make it here, then I need to put up with this as well. And I find fun in that. It does become enjoyable when I look at it that way. And there's always QA is infinitely granular. You can always do more testing. You can always find more data to collect. So if I'm not feeling challenged by a certain title and what the data they want to be, I can go a bit above and beyond. If they want like the most basic, like they don't even want FPS testing, they just want like GPU, CPU, RAM, which we usually offer, then I'll do some extra test cases or use it to try to test some new hardware we have, or try to do some managerial work on it too, just to get comfortable with those higher up positions if I want to take them. You can do a lot in this industry, and with that coupled with wanting to keep moving forward in this industry, whether that be through QA or gameplay programming, is where I find my fun and where I find the strength to keep going, making the money I do. Yeah. So those were a summation of my thoughts and my recommendations. I don't want to sound too harsh about the industry. There are certainly some unfair practices in parts. I would avoid like the plague. Don't work with Amazon ever, or Lionsgate, Lionsbridge, one of the two. Don't work with them. They treat you horribly, and I've had lots of people in horror stories where they just get kicked to the curb because Amazon canceled this title they're working on, because they cancel all their titles they're working on, and you were out of a job suddenly and with no warning. Microsoft, the Shield App teams, I've been enjoying it so far. Xperius is a bit they're worried about making a profit, and sometimes that comes to head with, hey, I want to live here and not starve. But they're amicable to negotiations at least. So be vigilant, no matter where you work, for abuses. And I think you'll be just fine. I'm doing fine so far, and I'll keep you updated if that changes for some reason. Yeah, so that covers my work, my thoughts on the industry as a whole, how I personally make the situation work, and what I plan to do, and hopefully that resonates with some of you guys to pursue it yourselves if that opportunity comes your way, or to look elsewhere if maybe you were thinking about it and some of my warnings just don't seem worth it to you. I totally understand. I hope if I stick with QA long enough, I can make positive change, at least if not for the industry as a whole and my department specifically, to treat workers with the rights I want to have right now. So yeah, that covers about everything. Thanks for giving me the floor. I hope I made enough sense to you guys, and yeah.
Do we have any more questions?
Any more questions from the crowd? Yeah, go ahead.
Has doing QA affected how you play games outside of work? Like, do you notice details that you wouldn't have noticed before?
It has, and it's annoying. I hate it. I hate playing games and approaching it like QA work. I'm like, oh, this. Like, I'll be playing a game and I'll notice something wrong, like Elden Ring when it released and all the performance hitching I had there. I was like, oh, I bet it's this thing, and I wonder what the GPU is, and I need to tell myself to stop and enjoy the game. It does certainly shape how I approach some games. It's pretty easy. Like, I still play games when I go home. It hasn't ruined my love for playing games on my off time. It's still how I relax and unwind. I don't know. I'm just crazy like that, I guess. But it does certainly shape my thoughts on when I look at games, how I dissect and enjoy them. I definitely still have a QA eye when it comes to noticing issues in games and certain functionalities and being like, oh, do they support this or that, or is it running well in my hardware or stuff like that. But overall, it's not too infuriating yet. At least we'll see in about a year or two if I can stand touching a game ever. Yeah. Anyone else? If not, I'll just show off my dog. He's very good. Shiloh. He's my little booby. He's about 14 years old. He works at the office with me. I actually got approval for an assistance animal. So he has his own little harness and badge he wears to work, and everyone loves it, and he loves it, and he sleeps all day, and it's great. It's probably one of my favorite things about working with Microsoft is they're very open to accommodations and their benefits. That's probably my favorite part. The most appealing aspect of the job I hold currently. If it paid better and kept these benefits, I would probably not be complaining as much as I am. I'd probably be pretty happy staying with this.
What breed is he?
He is a Portuguese Padango pequeño, so he's one of the smaller ones. They either come in like a curly hair or wire hair. He has his little wire hair. Any of you who were in the club back when I was in there probably saw him too. I would bring him on campus with me at all the time for game jams or meetings and such. Very good boy. He's been with me through a lot, and I hope he's learned something about QA too, with all the sleeping he does next to me.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Actually,
go ahead,
some
Yang.
questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So does does Microsoft consider anything about the after class experience? For example, the experience in weekend in Game Jam or in Game Drama Club?
Experience in what exactly? I didn't catch that.
For example, like making games during Game Jam or like after
As far as
class
QA,
experience.
I don't think it's quite relevant. It shows a passion for games, at least. I'll say that. The work in making a game is a lot different than testing a game. It's
Okay.
helped me understand what needs testing, and why certain things might be breaking. It's useful in that aspect. But as far as what uh, people who are hiring you will look at, it'll mostly show them that you're interested in the industry as a whole, and that you have an active passion that you put your time forth to engage in, which is a good sign. It just might not be directly relevant to are you a good QA tester? Exactly, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
For like these big game studios, where did you, well, if even for Microsoft, for instance, where did you find the application to be a QA tester?
So I don't know about the larger studios. Most of them you'll find on LinkedIn. That's what I did. I hunted around for about a month, and I did like QA test, gameplay programmer, stuff like that, and I searched and searched for a couple weeks until I stumbled upon specific ones for Experis. Sometimes they might be obfuscated if the QA is outsourced. Again, like the company I work, we're technically outsourced QA. We're not in house in Microsoft. We just rent an office space at the Microsoft campus, and we're associated with Microsoft. But like, I'm not an employee directly of them. So be mindful if a company doesn't seem, if it's something you don't know and it still says QA, it's possible they still work in game dev. It's just like they're an outsourced or third party QA test. But LinkedIn will get you 99% of the way there, honestly, or at least get you to the area. That's been the thing for me. Getting myself to Seattle has been great, and like being able to then pursue different opportunities because I'm already here and there's a lot of studios here. Yeah, if you're just searching online, LinkedIn's great. Like that's basically all you'll need to find these positions. You've just got to be vigilant and specific with what you're looking for.
Right. Unless anybody else has any questions, let's give a round of applause for Cole for talking to us today. Yeah, I don't have anything else, but thank you, Cole, a lot for coming.
No problem. Yeah. Do you mind if I do the outro? It's been a year.
Go for it, man.
I miss it. Okay. Well, if there's no other announcements to make, I would just like to say thank you all for letting me speak here. I love the opportunity to be able to share my wisdom, and being able to see all you guys again. I'm glad they're still going strong, and I wish you all the best of luck in whatever career paths you choose to take, whether that be game dev or otherwise. And with that being said, I would like you all to go forth, make games, and be awesome.